Hello, fellow hams. Well, another day, another repair job. This one's a Heathkit Micromatic keyer. This was a pretty cool keyer back in the day. I think this came out in the early 80s. And it did not use physical switches, it used capacitive touch sensitive metal paddles, so you would just touch. And in this case, the dash paddle works, the dot paddle is dead. Now it is the early part of winter here. It's actually right at the end of the year. And I talked to the owner and he said that he does get a static shock occasionally when he reaches for things on his work table or his radio desk. So I'm pretty certain that he got a static spark off of that paddle and popped the FET. We'll pull out the schematic and we'll have a look at how this thing works. Well, this is interesting. Hopefully that's in focus. I think it is. Here is the paddle inputs, left and right paddle inputs, and they come in through a reversing switch to allow you to switch left to right hand operation right into an input pin on U11A and on U11B. So the paddles feed right into an IC. I can go back to the parts and see what that is, but I think it's a logic gate. I think it's a CMOS chip too. Interestingly enough, the external paddle connector, which is on the back of the unit, it's buffered. It comes in through a transistor as a buffer, which switches a pin on the chip. And then the right comes up here to this transistor, which switches a pin on the chip. So they buffered the external paddles connector on the back of the unit, but they didn't buffer the actual built-in paddles. The built-in paddles go right to an IC. So that chip is going to have a dead input. And it doesn't look like they put any protection. Well, this is the inside of the keyer. And Heath did not make this thing easy to get together or get apart. All the wire runs pretty short. And this is the keypad here that goes into this edge connector, and there's just not very much play in that. So getting that in and out, you end up with about 1.5 inches of space to get in there with your fingers and try to unplug or plug that in. So these are not fun to take apart. The bottom case comes right off with 4 screws. And by the way, the bottom case, which is heavy in metal, also has the voltage regulator on it. And these pins line up with 3 holes in the bottom of the PC board where there's a connector on the other side, so you have to very carefully, in fact, I'm going to have to replace that voltage regulator. That pin is, I don't know if you can see that, I'm just touching that pin and it's moving around. Look at that. It's about to fall off. So we're going to have to, looks like somebody, oh man, yeah. Somebody bent that. The metal is cracked almost all the way through, so it's just barely making contact. Just plugging that back in, it's going to pop off. If I just look at, I just touch that, and it's just, the metal's broke all the way through. So, got to replace that voltage regulator. I think it's just a 5-volt regulator. I'll verify that. I've got plenty of 7805s. So we got to fix that. Here's the offending chip. It's a flip-flop. Yeah, it's a 4013 CMOS flip-flop. So doubly sensitive. It's CMOS. Those are notoriously sensitive to static, and they're feeding it the paddle inputs directly into the CMOS chip with no buffering or no protection against voltage. And the way that it's set up with the inputs, there's no way I can use diodes to protect it. So I'm just going to have to tell the owner to be very, very careful that he doesn't zap it again. And I have one. I dug through my collection and I've got a CD 4013 right here. So we'll replace that chip, replace the voltage regulator, get it all back together, and if it works, we'll clean it up and call it done. Well, I'd love to have the results video on that keyer, but just after I finished replacing the chip and the regulator on that from that last clip, the owner showed up. He had something else for me to work on, and I said, well, as long as you're here, let's put your keyer back together, and he took it. So I can't show you the result, but I replaced that CMOS flip-flop that the paddles are hooked to, and I replaced that 5-volt regulator in the base that had the pin that was nearly broken, and it just worked fine. So I would like to have had the time to cosmetically clean it up. I usually clean up the radios I fix, but anyway. Sorry I can't show a demo of it operating, but it's already back in its owner's hands, and he's quite happy. So thanks for watching anyway. I hope you enjoyed a glance inside of the Heathkit Micromatic gear anyway. And 73.